It seems that one day a rabbi and his wife were cleaning up their house. The rabbi came across a box that he didn't recognize. He asked his wife about it. She told him to leave it alone. It was her personal box. But when she was out, his curiosity got the best of him, and he opened the box. In it were 3 eggs and $2,000. When his wife got home, he admitted he had opened the box and asked her to explain its contents. She told him that every time he preached a bad sermon, she would put an egg in the box. He interrupted. In 20 years, only 3 bad sermons, not bad. His wife continued, every time I got a dozen eggs, I'd sell them for $1. I love that joke. And I love that I'm its punchline. With all the honor and kavod that surrounds the rabbi on Yontif, the cash and the eggs and the wife and that joke keep me from getting carried away. But in fact, Jewish tradition demands of all Jews to strive for bitul hayesh, a state of self-nullification, to separate from our egos so that we can truly connect with some source of meaning beyond us. To paraphrase the words of the Psalms, Esa enai el heharim, I lift my eyes unto the mountains, may ayin yavo ezri, from ayin, from nothing, from seeing myself as a fragment, a tiny spark, a particle of energy so minute that you'd hardly call it a thing. From that, I gain perspective. And all of you may have heard the story about the rabbi and the cantor and the temple president who struggled to fulfill this value. It happened during the middle of a High Holy Day service. The rabbi stopped his readings, walked to the middle of the bema, prostrated himself before the ark, and cried out, "Oh God, before you I am nothing." The cantor was so moved by this pious demonstration, she threw herself as well down on the floor beside her colleague and cried out, "Oh God, before you I am nothing." The temple president took a break from practicing his Rosh Hashanah speech and, wanting to set a good example, also laid down on the bema, repeating the rabbi and the cantor's words of humility. Finally, Chaim Pickman, a tailor, jumped up from his seat in the congregation, prostrated himself in the aisle, and cried out, "Oh God, before you I am nothing." The cantor nudged the rabbi and whispered, "Look who thinks he's nothing." It's not easy being nothing. No simple task to admit how flawed, how small we can be. But the High Holy Days summon each of us to lead a soul-searching inquiry into our personal conduct. And lest we think this is merely a cerebral exercise, tradition tells us to physically draw near to those with whom we've had conflict. We're to get near them, to promote a possibility, however thin, of reconciliation. We can then look back at this season, not just on recent months, but on the human failures that we have committed throughout our lives, to see if what we've torn over the years is now on the mend. For ideally, we can approach God during these days and confess our failures. Avinu Malkeinu, we can say, we sinned. We showed disrespect. We were negligent to our heritage. We faulted in others the sins we tolerated in ourselves. We gossiped. We slandered. We were hateful. Personally, when I hear these harsh confessions of our High Holy Day prayers, I imagine them being spoken and softened in a way by the voices of those from whom I have admiration. I hear these words in the voices of my parents, my grandparents, my rabbi. When I hear these words personally intoned by those whom I revere, I feel called upon them, called by them, called by community to do teshuvah, to pay attention, to notice pain I've caused, to accept responsibility for wrongdoings, to turn from these ways and live. Paying attention, noticing harm, accepting responsibility, and turning. These actions are worth our admiration. And Judaism doesn't present us perfect exemplars of them. Rather, the Torah depicts flawed human beings, individuals capable of both severe betrayal and earnest penitence. The men and women in our Torah are a good match for our immediate family ancestries. The examples set for us by our moms and dads, aunts and uncles, and other flawed adults who helped each of us into maturity. These are examples of people who struggled to live accountable to their highest values, folks who fell but got right back up to the tasks of seeking life, seeking forgiveness, seeking God's help. As a rabbi, I often meet people who are under the false presumption that a holy act like teshuvah, like repentance, was possible only for our ancestors in the Torah, but that it's too late for us. Nothing could be further from the truth. If holiness were ever possible, then it's possible right now. According to Judaism, each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world. You need not be famous or learned to do something holy. You can choose this moment, this present moment, to do something. You can make repentance with one another and with God. This time is as holy as any time in history, as any time that we've ever sought to bring about dignity, reconciliation, and healing. Right now, with no burning bush on your path, right now you could be standing on holy ground if you'd only be willing to put one foot in front of the other and walk humbly, stepping from where you are to where you might yet be. That is why we search our souls on Rosh Hashanah. It is why we search our souls so that we can mark our paths with integrity, so that we can stand on holy ground. And it's heartening. It is heartening when you see people who live up to that ideal. Amazing when you encounter a person who's truly exceptional, not just in their talents or generosity, but in their willingness to honestly step up and ask for forgiveness when they err. Isn't it sad? So very sad that those examples seem to be countercultural. So many in our modern culture misuse and manipulate penitence as though humility and humanity were something a publicist can coach into you and not something that you practice habitually throughout your life. I'm thinking here of cycling champion Lance Armstrong. To me, his confession this past year was the opposite of self-nullification. It was self-glorification, poorly disguised. Did you see the interview in which he finally admitted to having doped his way to winning 6 Tours de France? Did you see it? As one who had admired Lance Armstrong, I watched that interview carefully. What I thought was the most revealing moment of the interview was when he blamed the culture of winning at all costs for him having doped and lied and slandered and putting others in jeopardy. He justified his use of drugs, comparing them to air in his tires or water in his bottle. It was part of his job, he said. One thing he didn't say was how he was going to make it right. He didn't admit his own complicity in that culture. He didn't say what he was going to do for those he'd hurt. And friends, I'm not telling you something you don't know. I'm not telling you that there was some astonishing new piece of information in that interview. I don't even have a complete idea of why I thought it might go differently. Perhaps it was simply that his company's brand, Live Strong, had reached me. Live Strong to me didn't mean just getting on your bike with cancer and cycling your way to a medal. It meant showing a champion's level of strength in your humanity. It meant living strong not just when you win, but when you fail. When you take notice of those whom you failed. When you take responsibility and you make a change. And no one that any of us has wronged, not our family, our friends, not God, require a national TV interview to admit our failings. It is in simple, quiet moments that we can turn to those whom we most trust and admit our faults. For God knows it is in those same quiet moments that we face loneliness, frustration, jealousy, and regret, those volatile emotions that probably made us sin in the first place. But Jewish tradition insists that we must not be spooked by these feelings. In the rabbinic tractate Avot de Rabbi Natan, we are taught, Who is the greatest of all heroes? The one who turns an enemy into a friend. My rabbi taught me that this text is meant not just for physical, but for emotional enemies. It's supposed to show us that the mightiest of all of us, the ones who are truly living strong, are those who summon the strength to turn their loneliness, frustration, and jealousy into yearning, to resolution and trust. These are the heroes to emulate, those who fail us, but who rise up from each failing honestly, always aspiring to a higher value. I heard these teachings as a child. I heard my rabbi speak of failing and wrongdoing, repentance and forgiveness. And somehow I mistakenly thought that these teachings were meant only for the sanctuary. I was just a kid, and I had mistakenly sequestered the teachings of our Torah right inside the temple and neglected to bring them with me into my daily life, into the classrooms I inhabited, the pathways and playgrounds where I walked or biked. The thing is that my rabbi had always been a leader in preaching against bigotry. But when I look back, I don't remember him ever teaching from the Bema that homosexuality was against our religion. I don't remember it, and that was okay, because in the era in which I was raised, he didn't have to. From nearly every source, I had already heard the distinct message that being gay was a ticket to being unhappy and excluded. In my early years, fellow kids told me if you were gay, it was contagious. People would run away from you. The adults around me said, I just feel bad for them. I imagine the problems they'll have in life. And no one at my synagogue, not in the religious school or youth group, put those issues of homosexuality or pride into our discussion. It was talked about in a whisper or not at all. So not knowing any better, I was not more than 10 years old the first time I called someone an ugly and derogatory slur for being gay. If I remember correctly, David moved to our school in the 4th grade. And here was a kid who marched to his own drummer. That's not a euphemism. He really marched. He danced, he trotted his way into the cafeteria, joyfully. Somewhere in the distance, he heard his own music. He was gay, we said, and in truth, he probably was. But it didn't matter who he was. What we meant was he should be ashamed of himself. We were threatened by him being different. It didn't have to do with his being Jewish or Christian or gay or straight. We didn't know. We just knew he didn't play on the sports teams we organized during recess. We knew his voice was sweet and quiet. We knew he was imaginative and silly and caring, and so we never let him get over it. We bullied him. We bullied him. But the thing is, David never let us see how sad our name-calling and pushing him around made him feel. He internalized it all, so it got boring, at least for me. So I ignored him. As we grew up through middle school, between new kids who got a kick out of picking on him and silence of kids like me, he was ostracized from probably every circle of friends. I don't even remember seeing him again till high school, when I took notice of him. At high school, we both joined the drama department. For both of us, the environment of theater was exhilarating. In that setting, I saw David let down the guard he had built up all those years to protect himself from bullies like me or worse. We weren't friends. We were colleagues, fellow actors. So I got to see up close that he was just another guy, a human being. I remember feeling happy that he had found a place where he was greeted with warmth, no matter who he was. And I'll never forget the honors assembly our first year in high school. The cheerleaders performed, the principal and the sports coaches spoke, and every department in school gave out awards. When our theater director announced David's name as the winner for the best new actor, I saw something you rarely see in such a big high school. 1,600 students doing one thing in unison. They booed and hissed and cooed at this caring and sensitive and talented gay young man. I'll never forget that day, because in it I realized the kind of cruelty and horrible meanness to which I had been a part. It's funny, I don't remember any of the kids in our predominantly Jewish high school calling out citations from the Torah as our grounds for rejecting him. I don't remember people saying homosexuality was against our religion. No, we were reminding him, no matter his religion, his sexuality, his humanity, he was unwanted. And I'm telling you that story, that uncomfortable story, on this Rosh Hashanah night for two reasons. The first is so that we might ask ourselves whether such cruelty is still possible today. For me, the only honest answer to that question is yes. Of course it is. For though this past year we have seen many changes in society, true equality and loving dignity cannot be conferred by a judge nor a court, no matter how supreme its stature. No president, no pope, or principal in a school can speak affirmation and love into a culture that chooses shame and blame over honesty and acceptance. A change in culture, a change from one that shuns those who are different, takes more than words and wishes. It takes individuals who take responsibility and follow through on repentance, turning from their ways. For people of faith, it means rooting out bigotry in our halls of worship and our classrooms. But for Jews, this means remembering not just the beauty of our Jewish values. It means remembering that repeatedly throughout history, we have failed to live up to those values that demand empathy and sensitivity to the stranger, to the other. The destruction of the temple, the seminal event in Jewish history, was caused, we are taught, by hatred without basis, what the rabbis called sinat chinam. This is the biggest stain on our moral record, a sin that God remembers even today as we come to ask for forgiveness. So with this in mind, if I tell you that I've rid my own heart, or the heart of this community, from such hatefulness, now, who exactly would I be kidding? Through a chain of events I personally helped begin early in my life, a young man was dealt a horrific blow. And even once I saw how ugly it could become, I did nothing. Nothing. Confessing that is difficult. No one wants to be seen as unkind. It's hard to admit that darkness can rise within our hearts, but it can. It could. The potential for ugliness remains. We are the Jewish people. We seek holy ground, but along our path, darkness, shame, and indifference are placed before us, and Judaism demands that we choose life, that we choose honest lives of aspiration and failure. In this way, we live strong. In this way, we live strong as a small and minute part of a grand and high and holy energy. Then we can truly say with clarity, Esa enai el heharim. I lift my eyes unto the mountains, the heights of truth and reconciliation. May ayin yavo ezri.